I'm so excited to be sharing this episode with you. It's so powerful. So this episode combined with next week is really why I created this whole podcast, because more and more people need to know this information, because without knowing this, we're stuck in a cycle of dealing with symptoms and health issues and never feeling as great as we should be. So today I'm talking about the 6 biggest gut disruptors. There are so many disruptors out there that cause inflammation, but I've categorized them, most of them, into 6 categories. So I'm going to go into all 6 of them. I'm going to tell you what's going on, how they're causing inflammation, and then what we can do about it. So it's really important for me that you actually not only know this information, but you actually have the tools to be able to apply it at home. Because when you apply these things that I share with you, these strategies and tips, you are going to see a huge difference, because all of these micro steps are going to accumulate into big recoveries. So that's my promise to you. And I cannot wait to dive in now. Before we talk about the 6 biggest gut disruptors, which actually cause inflammation and chronic inflammation over time, and it's these disruptors that wreak havoc on your gut, your hormones, your mood, your immunity, and your overall health and your digestion. So most of us are living with chronic symptoms. Last week, I talked about the chronic health crisis in children affecting 1 in 2 children nowadays. Now I'm going to talk about women. Most of us are dealing with chronic health issues as women. In fact, 1 in 2 women are living with a chronic condition, whether it's autoimmune disease, endometriosis, thyroid issues, pain, anxiety, or chronic fatigue. And I'm going to give you an example of how inflammation is working. It starts off small and then it can build over time. Now, in the United States, 1 in 3 women up until the age of 60 will have a hysterectomy. That's actually removing the uterus. In Australia, 1 in 5 women will have that surgery. The thing is, these symptoms accumulated way back, years ago, decades ago. They started with small amounts of symptoms and inflammation. So this is how it looks. As kids, we may start puberty early. So nowadays, we have kids starting puberty from the age of 8, 9, 10, when it should be 12 or 13. Then as teenagers, we're dealing with heavy, painful periods. Then we're getting things like PCOS, infertility issues, severe pelvic pain, endometriosis, fibroids, those are benign tumors, and then chronic perimenopause symptoms. Finally, we resort to a hysterectomy. These are all signs of chronic inflammation. They started a long time ago, but because we didn't address it then, they kept building and building and building. So at first, the body whispers, but if we don't listen, it begins to scream. Now, nearly 70% of hysterectomies are for non-cancerous reasons. These women aren't getting life-saving surgeries. They're getting last resort relief after years of symptoms that were managed and not healed. So the uterus basically becomes the victim. It was never the villain. And the same happens with children. I see this over and over again. And I'm going to give an example, but there's so many different examples of how our children's health and how inflammation is developing and creating chronic health issues leading to surgery. So, for example, by the time a child ends up having their tonsils or adenoids removed or their grommets put in, their body has been crying out for help for months, maybe even years. And it's really tough for the parent and for the child. And these symptoms and clues start early. So with babies, it may be colic, and we're told to, this is normal, just wait 3 months, it will get better. That is horrible advice for anyone to hear, but it's also a sign that things aren't quite right. Then after that, we may start seeing our children have reoccurring infections, whether it's ear infections or croup. We're given antibiotics to fix those, or Panadol. And then those don't get resolved. But that reoccurring infections, that's a sign of a little bit of inflammation in the immune system. Yes, it's normal for our children to get infections, but they should also recover fairly quickly. After that, if we don't resolve the inflammation there, we are going to see children develop eczema, then asthma, then hay fever, then allergies and intolerances. And you have this atopic march, this allergy march of symptoms. Eventually, our children get enlarged tonsils. And so what happens then? They have difficulty breathing, so they start mouth breathing and snoring. They may develop sleep apnea, and even fatigue. And then during the day, they're getting really irritable and they're diagnosed with a behavioral disorder. So a parent in this situation naturally wants to make sure her child is not struggling, and then surgery is offered as a final solution to get relief. The tonsils, which are part of the immune system's frontline defense, is the victim and not the villain. And while surgery may bring short-term relief, it doesn't resolve the deeper issue, and that's an inflamed and overloaded immune system. So symptoms come back one way or another. So now that I've set the scene and been rather dramatic, which I wanted to do to get your attention and to get you to start thinking about how you're living your life. Are you symptom managing and dealing with inflammation, or are you addressing the root cause? So what I want to share now with you are the 6 biggest drivers of inflammation that wreak havoc on your gut, your hormones, your mood, and your health. And then at the end, I want to share the number 1 biggest impact on gut health. And this one will shock you. So let's get started. So gut disruptor number 1 is the SAD diet. Okay, this sounds boring and we all think we know what we're doing here, but the SAD diet is basically the standard Australian diet or the standard American diet. There are so many gut disruptors here. And the obvious ones are your whole processed foods and the highly refined sugars, the colors, the flavors, the preservatives, the additives. They are all chemicals. These are things we should never be consuming, let alone in such vast quantities. Just think about breakfast and school lunch boxes. We send our kids with sugary cereals. Even if it seems to be a fairly healthy cereal, it's not fresh. It's lacking fiber. It's been stripped of lots of nutrients, and it's often overloaded with sugars. So cereal could contain a lot of sugar, then you might have a juice, and then we send our kids to school. I'm not joking. I mean, I know so much love and attention goes into lunch boxes and they look really great, but 80% on average are highly processed foods. So again, void of nutrition, no real fresh produce there. So what happens is we're feeding the wrong microbes in the gut. These are pathogens, yeast, viruses, and they love sugar. They love all the additives. They thrive on that. They love all the processed stuff, the fried foods, the highly processed meats. But these foods damage the gut lining, spike blood sugar, and keep the immune system inflamed. I call these foods robbers because it actually requires a lot of nutrients from the body to try and digest this nonsense. They bring nothing in return. They bring no nutrients in return. So our child, after eating a meal, will actually be in deficit. And you do that every single day for months, it accumulates and it creates a lot of inflammation. Now, what's not obvious in the standard Australian diet or American diet is that what also causes inflammation are considered quite healthy foods like dairy and wheat. But these foods are also very highly processed. And many of us, because we're dealing with gut dysbiosis, we can't digest these foods easily. So they cause inflammation, they cause acidity, and they feed a lot of the wrong bacteria in the gut. So when I took out dairy and gluten out of my diet 14 years ago, when I was on 8 rounds of steroids a day, diagnosed with severe depression, having chronic fatigue, I had no idea that these 2 food groups were aggravating those conditions, and I was eating them 3 or 4 times a day. I took them out of my diet. Within weeks, I felt so much better. And I'm now no longer on any medication or have any of these symptoms. It's that powerful. So the one thing I want you to take away is not only the processed foods that are obviously inflammatory, but it's foods like dairy and gluten and sugar, of course. And I'm pretty certain that 9 out of 10 of you listening are dealing with an intolerance like dairy and gluten. And you probably know it, but you just don't want to think about it and you want to ignore it. But reduce these foods or take them out for a little bit and you will experience life-changing results. Like I really mean it. Okay, so what do we eat instead? So we want to eat real food. Our gut microbes love plant-based fiber. Now there's so much noise out there that we need loads of protein, loads of healthy fats, and that's fine. But don't forget that fiber is really important. Fiber is plant-based foods like fruit, vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and gluten-free grains, of course. We want to have a lot of that in the diet because they directly feed all the good bacteria in your gut, and it's your good bacteria that's going to drive down that inflammation and reduce those symptoms. So have a think about when you're at the supermarket, where do you spend most of your time shopping? Are you shopping around the edges of the supermarket where the fresh produce is and the frozen foods? So when I go to the supermarket, where I go in the frozen section is just frozen berries and frozen veggies, but most of the fresh produce is on the side. Now, if you're spending most of your time in the middle aisles, that's where a lot of your processed foods are, your fizzy drinks, your juices, and your cereals, and your snacks and all things like that, and tin foods and microwave meals and all of that. So have a think of where you spend your time in the supermarket, because that gives you an indication of how much of your food is fresh and how much of it is produced and products. So my top tips for you are, and it's not about trying to do things perfectly, it's definitely progress over perfection, but even if it's just have an extra piece of fruit or a vegetable a day. So when I started out on my health journey and had my health breakthrough, I promised myself I would have 5 pieces of fruit and veg a day before I went to bed. So if I didn't make that quota before I'd go to bed, I'd just quickly eat a carrot. So make an achievable goal for yourself to increase fiber. I would love to suggest 5 serves of fruit or vegetables, and a serving size is the size of the palm of your hand. But whatever is achievable for you, just get started so you can create a habit. And know that this doesn't require motivation or willpower. Just know that what you're eating is either going to feed your good bacteria that's going to drive down inflammation, or your bad bacteria, your viruses, your yeast, and that is going to drive up inflammation. Then you can make a really conscious choice. Here are some other really easy wins. Replace flavored crisps or crackers that are high in preservatives, additives, flavors, and colors, and replace them with just salted versions. So literally it's rice, oil, and salt. And that's going to be so much better for you. Try and avoid and reduce juices and fizzy drinks. If you have 2 a day, try and have 1. Can you imagine how much less sugar you'd be having for you or your kids? It makes a massive difference over time. Some other ideas are, one thing that I cringe a lot is at kids' sports games, the hot dogs and the lolly snakes. You know, we do that every week. I'm not a killjoy, but what I do with my kids, they would love those hot dogs, but I find them really carcinogenic. So the white bread, the cheap sausage meat, it's just, you know, the ketchup, each of those things has loads of chemicals. We're talking maybe 100 chemicals. It's basically a chemical shitstorm. And we're doing it every time they play sports. So what I do, my kids will whinge when I don't give it to them. I give them the snake, so I balance things out. But then we'll go home and I'll make them my own version of a hot dog, which is a really good, high quality, high protein sausage with our own gluten-free bread, and they love it. Or I'll make them a big fry-up, but I'll make it healthy, it's whole foods, and it's not processed. Another option is, because we have a lot of lunch boxes, you know, it's ham sandwiches. Ham can be full of nitrates and lots of chemicals. I like to just poach chicken, where literally I get chicken breast, I'll boil that in a sauce, I'll boil some water in a saucepan, put the breast in there, and then turn off the heat. And 20 minutes, I've got chicken, and I'll shred that, and that will fill up the sandwiches. So there's so many little things that you can do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. And if that seems like too much, just start making upgrades. Change a fizzy drink to a juice, or go from white, highly processed bread to a sourdough. If you want to learn more about the additives and chemicals in our food, check out the Chemical Maze app. You can literally get your food label and you can enter in an additive number, and the Chemical Maze will tell you what the symptoms are. A lot of the symptoms you're dealing with your children or yourself, like hyperactivity, skin rashes, migraines, headaches, all of these things can be attributed to these preservatives and colors. Okay, gut disruptor number 2. This is toxic chemicals and heavy metals. These are dire, and we really need to become aware of this. So we're exposed to about 700 to 2,000 chemicals a day, depending on your lifestyle, your diet, and your choices. And almost 300 chemicals are found in umbilical cords in our babies. So these babies are born with a heavy load, and then they're exposed to more chemicals every day after that. So things like mercury, lead, arsenic, and aluminium, these are known contributors to things like fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, hormone disruption, fertility struggles, autoimmunity, eczema, psoriasis, and behavioral issues in kids and behavioral issues in adults as well. And we can find these toxic chemicals everywhere, in the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe. It's impossible to avoid it all completely, but we can make some really smart choices to reduce exposure. So when it comes to food, it's again all the preservatives and the pesticides as well. Now, pesticides and these preservatives won't kill us directly, but their goal is to kill off microbes. So the food can have a longer shelf life, or the plants don't get eaten up by insects, but they really harm our gut microbiome. And a lot of toxins leach into our meals. So when we're cooking or buying food in packaging, they leach into the food we eat. So we've got PFAs, which are forever chemicals, and they're found in non-toxic cookware, Teflon cookware, food packaging, plastic, tin foods, tin foil, baking paper. It all leaches into our food, and these are all chemicals. Some ideas are, instead of using non-stick pans, choose ceramic or stainless steel, or just make sure that your non-stick pans are not scratched, because as soon as they're scratched, they're releasing even more chemicals. And don't overheat non-stick pans, because the chemicals will leach into the food even more. When it comes to water, which has neurotoxins, chlorine and fluoride, we feel we need these to keep our teeth healthy. No, we need a better diet. But those chemicals are neurotoxins. They impact our brain. So really start thinking about getting a water filter. You can get a simple jug, or you can have an inbuilt system at home. I've got buying guides on my website. So check out my website, sharonmselby.com. But definitely think about getting a water filter. And we can find these toxins as well in our personal care products, makeup, body creams, deodorants, sunscreen. Like, these are all necessary things for us to live and enjoy, but we want to make lower toxic choices. So all of these are loaded with toxins like parabens, phthalates, synthetic fragrances, and these mess with hormones, trigger our skin irritations, and also impact our mood and behavior, and even our fertility, which we spoke about earlier. So definitely swap for natural alternatives. And now I've been in this space now for over 10 years. There are so many great variety of products that are low tox and more safe. You can even find them in your main supermarkets, but you can definitely find them online. And brands that I really like are Weleda, Mugu, Dr. Bronner's, Whatnot Naturals, and Vanessa Megan. I love her. So just check out some of these brands. And when you run out of these products, try and get better alternatives. And that's just such a quick, easy upgrade. It's a no-brainer. The same with our cleaning products. They contain ammonia, bleach, and synthetic fragrances. And these are chemicals linked to respiratory issues, hormone disruption, skin irritations, and behavioral changes in kids. So if you've got young kids and they're entering their teen years, be careful with the deodorants you use. Choose the more safe, natural ones. Products that I like, or brands that I like, are Koala, Eco, Kinkin, Abode, Eco Store, and Resparkle, but there are many more online that you can find. Okay, on to plastics. This is still part of the whole toxic chemicals and heavy metals. So we eat about 5 grams of plastic every week. That's the equivalent of a credit card. That is huge. So I just want you to think about that. These plastics contain chemicals like BPA, or various alternatives to BPA, and phthalates, and they mimic hormones, especially estrogen. So these endocrine disruptors have been linked to early puberty, fertility issues, ADHD, PCOS, and endometriosis, and so many more issues. So what I want you to start doing is avoiding things or minimizing exposure to cling wrap around food. Try and use glass containers. Replace your plastic bottles with glass or stainless steel bottles. If you're relying on microwavable meals, try and find an alternative. Because once you put it in the microwave, those chemicals are leaching into your foods. And another one that you may not be aware of are receipts. So every time you take a receipt, they are full of microplastics and BPA and alternatives. So when my kids were young, I never let them hold the receipts after we'd been shopping. So I hope some of those ideas can help you make some upgrades to avoid exposure. So you're minimizing exposure. What's worse about these toxic chemicals and heavy metals, to add insult to injury, these toxins feed viruses in your body. So they have a double-edged power of brutality on us. They affect our inflammation, and they also feed the very things in our gut that we don't want to accumulate. So I'm a big fan of Anthony Williams' heavy metal detox smoothie, the medical medium. So we can actually eat foods to latch onto these toxins and safely remove them from our body. I love the heavy metal detox smoothie, and I use a brand called Pucea to add in superfoods like spirulina, barley grass juice powder, dulse flakes, and wild blueberry powder. So as you go on this journey, you will learn more and more about exposure to toxins, and also how you can use food as medicine to release them from the body. Before this feels overwhelming, this took me years to research and learn about. But what I'm doing is giving you a bit of a brain dump here, because what I want is just for you to make 2 or 3 upgrades and they will have a huge impact. Don't even try and do all of it. I just want you to have the awareness for now. So gut disruptor number 3 is medication. Ooh. Okay, so medication, before I get myself into trouble, medication can be life-saving, and used wisely, it's incredible. And everything I share, please always check with your medical practitioner and discuss with them. But what I find with medication nowadays is we use it as a first and only resort. We don't even investigate to see what the issue is. So rather than a last line of defense, we use it straight away. And this doesn't fix inflammation. What it does is help manage those symptoms, which, depending on what you're dealing with, is very important. But what we should be doing is looking at these gut disruptors and making these upgrades so we can reduce that inflammation and get to the root cause of healing the gut. So we are raised with this quick fix mindset. We have this symptom, have this medication. And over time, this can disrupt gut function and set the stage for medical dependency. So everything from baby Panadol to birth control and antibiotics affect the gut microbiome. For example, antibiotics wipe out good bacteria too, not just the bad bacteria. So if we give antibiotics to a child before the age of 2, we increase their learning disability by 21%. We increase their chances of getting ADD by 32%. And there's a 90% increase in asthma if we give 1 round of antibiotics to a child before the age of 2. That's huge. And the same applies to women. If a woman or adult has antibiotics, there's a 23% more likely chance she'll develop depression a year later. That increases to 56% if she has a 2nd round of antibiotics. So we want to be very wise with the medication we use. And we want to really check with our practitioner, are there other alternatives before we use medication? And things like reflux meds, which we give to young babies, they reduce stomach acids, which are essential to digestion and absorbing nutrients. Perhaps there's something in the diet that's causing reflux. In fact, I know there is. And the same goes with colic. And then for kids that are dealing with eczema, steroid creams are amazing to numb down those symptoms. And that is essential. I know so many families, thousands of families I've worked with terrible eczema. But the steroid creams kill the skin microbiome. So then you're more prone to infection on the skin and you need antibiotics. So what we need to do is address the root cause, which is actually the inflammation inside the body. Once we see the symptoms, we've already got inflammation inside. So that's what we need to fix. Gut disruptor number 4, are wonderful doctors and practitioners. Now, we're really fortunate now that we have GPs, we have specialists, but we also have naturopaths and homeopaths and chiros and acupuncturists and kinesiology and health coaches. Now, all of these are amazing modalities to help us relieve symptoms, reduce symptoms, and drive down inflammation. And one thing I've worked out over the years is that when it comes to our health, we don't actually do any research. We just go straight to our GP and they send us to their specialist and we become a passenger in our health. But because our health is so important, you need to have a lot of empowerment. You need to know that your goals are aligned. Do you want to address the root cause? Do you want to create prevention? Or are you in a state where you need to just manage symptoms for now? Everything has its place, but we really need to think about the doctors that we work with and are we aligned? Because doctors are trained in a system that's designed for crisis, but not always prevention. And most symptoms, if you think about it, are not urgent. Do we have time to address them at the root cause? For example, if we're dealing with very mild eczema, can it be simply a case of just removing dairy for a couple of weeks and we might see an improvement? I know with my son Jake, when he was a baby, when he was 1 year old, he started getting reoccurring ear infections. So what I did was I kept going to my GP. He was not happy. He was very irritated and in pain. And of course, I went to the ear, nose, and throat specialist and they could see that he was struggling. So of course, out came the antibiotics. After I did that a few times and he kept getting reoccurring infections, and then it happened that I started learning about nutrition, I worked out that actually dairy was a trigger. So I took out dairy because I felt he was intolerant to it. And that was 12 years ago. I took out dairy from his diet for a few weeks. He's never had an ear infection and he's never had antibiotics since. I wish I knew what the root cause was to that inflamed immune system. And he didn't need antibiotics because it wasn't a bacterial infection. It was an intolerance to dairy that was causing inflammation. So ask yourself, are you in a cycle of healthcare or sickness care? Healthcare is when you're feeling great, you're getting to the root cause and you're relieving symptoms. Sickness care is when we're managing symptoms, we're using medication to numb one symptom and then another and then another. So there can be a balance of two, but I really want you to start thinking about real healthcare and work with your practitioner to achieve your goals and keep asking questions. If I take this medication, what kind of improvements can I see? How long do I need to take this medication for? It's really important that you feel comfortable to ask questions to your practitioner. Okay, gut disruptor number 5 is stress. Stress is huge. Now, your body is incredible. It has this incredible built-in system called the fight or flight response. It's designed to protect you, and it's basically like a superpower. It's there to help you outrun danger. So a long, long time ago, as cavemen, we would use our fight or flight to run from danger, like running away from a lion. And that's what kept you safe and alive. You needed this fight or flight response. Now, that system was meant to turn on in very short bursts and then turn off once the danger passed. The thing is, nowadays, because we're always switched on, our body doesn't know the difference between being chased by a lion or rushing to school drop-off, or for your kids who are crushing it on Fortnite. So gaming, social media, food toxins, multitasking, checking our Instagram, all of it is switching on that fight or flight. And what's happening is in a 16-hour day, we are constantly switched on from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to finally sleep. And that is causing such stress and inflammation on our body. In this state, your gut can't function properly. Your body isn't thinking about healing, resting, or digesting. It's just trying to survive from danger. Even if you're having a good time, your body feels like it's in survival mode. So I'll share a really funny story. I was out walking with my dog the other day and he was off the leash and he saw a turkey bird. Now this turkey bird was in a state of bliss and total, like oblivious to the upcoming danger. And it was just strolling around, checking out the scenery. And then suddenly my dog comes running after it. And this turkey bird, within a nanosecond, literally, I've never seen anything like it. It was like a cartoon. It ran up a huge tree, like vertically ran up the tree. And that was its fight or flight response. Now, if you're really relaxed, you can't do that. The body is suddenly switched on to survive. And that is what we're doing. So can you imagine, we're like that turkey bird, 16 hours a day. It's just not working. The cortisol that keeps getting pumped out is like acid on the gut. So we definitely want to find ways to downregulate our nervous system and calm down. So I've got some tips for you. Screen times. Have some boundaries. For children as well, I never let them game at night. It's difficult. You have to have some boundaries. Maybe it's a couple of hours during the day and that's all I'll do. I encourage my children and myself to go outdoors, get some walking in, get some movement, maybe have some quiet time reading. Allow your kids to get bored and switch off. Our kids don't get bored anymore. And because we're so busy, we want to keep them entertained, but that is affecting their stress levels, which is causing inflammation in young kids as well. So we need to address that as soon as possible with little tweaks in our lifestyle. And that leads me to gut disruptor number 6, which is lifestyle. This is huge, and we never make time for it because we always prioritize what is urgent and not what's important. And we need to flip that. There is a great saying that says, when you are healthy, you have 1,000 problems, but when you are sick, you have one. So I don't want you to wait till we get a scary diagnosis. We can make very small changes to really improve our lifestyle, to support our gut microbiome, and to drive down inflammation. And I always say to my families that I've mentored over the years, the best 6 doctors are sunshine, fresh air, water, rest, sleeping, exercise and movement, and nutrition. They sound boring and not important, but these completely change the quality of your life for yourself and for your children. And the more you tweak now, the more accumulative effects you'll get over time. Kids are supposed to be outside playing in the sunshine for over 4 hours a day. They're supposed to be climbing trees, going fishing, falling over and playing and running around. But how many of our kids are actually doing that? That is so important for lowering down their stress levels, to switch off and downregulate. So I've got some other tips other than spending more time outside. We need to improve our sleep routine. Turn off the phone before an hour or two before bed, walk the dog, go on bushwalks, go swimming in the ocean. I always recommend meditation, but I even haven't mastered that. But we can keep trying. But that's why there's so many people that swear by meditation for completely changing their life. But you can do a 5-minute meditation in the morning, deep breathing, gratitude in the morning. Instead of reaching out for the phone, just say 5 things you're grateful for. Find a hobby. I've started salsa dancing. I mean, I'm terrible at salsa dancing. I feel so sorry for the partner that I'm dancing with. But for an hour, I'm not thinking about anything else but trying to follow this routine. And it's so good to switch off. So find some hobbies. You're going to struggle because you're not going to think you have time for it, but you actually do. Just think about the amount of hours we spend scrolling, doom scrolling. Just take 20 minutes of that time to go outside and go for a walk, or get a coffee with a friend. Instead of sitting down, just go and have a coffee, a walking coffee and a chat. It's just amazing. So choose anything to help you out of fight or flight, downregulate that nervous system and protect your adrenals. And this will help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest, and will help switch off that stress response, which is fight and flight. Okay, now I promised I'd share the number one at the beginning of this episode, the number one biggest impact on gut health. I would love to know your guesses, but the number one biggest impact on gut health is you. It's not your doctor. It's nothing else. It's you. Because healing happens at home. I think many of us think that the 15 minutes in the GP's office or the hour appointment at the naturopath is all you need to do to heal and recover. It's not the case. We spend 99.9% of our time at home, and it's the choices at home that dictate whether your treatment plan is effective or not, because you are the one deciding what to eat. You are the ones determining your stress levels, your sleep routine, all of those things. So it's really important to know that you are in charge of your health. And the best way to start making better choices is to learn about health and well-being and gut health, and listen to podcasts just like this one and others so that you can be motivated to make some great steps. So I feel education is critical, and I think that is the missing link for all of us and why we're seeing such a huge decline in our health and in our children's health. And as most of us, I imagine, we're feeling really disempowered and we're not sure how to improve our well-being. So learning about these things are critical. So before we wrap up, I have some recommendations for you. Knowing all this stuff is one thing, but applying it is everything. So I'd love you to choose 3 upgrades to minimize gut disruptors and the things that are causing inflammation. So have a think about some of the things that I've said about diet and lifestyle and stress. You will not be able to do everything at once. As I mentioned, this took me years to start improving, but I would love you to consider what are the lowest hanging fruits, the easy upgrades. So pick those. What's easy for you to do every day now until we meet next week? And I've got some ideas. For example, can you get a water filter, or can you just drink more water instead of a juice or a fizzy drink? How about a morning smoothie that's full of fiber, some beautiful berries, some spinach? That's going to feed all your good bacteria in the gut. They are going to love you for it. Is it replacing a plastic water bottle with a stainless steel bottle? Is it upgrading your deodorant, going for a walk with your friend, going to bed earlier, having less screen time? These are just ideas, but I would love you to write it down. Do these little micro steps every single day. And I swear you're going to feel so much better for it. And then over time, they will become habit and you can have new goals that you can then develop. So please DM me on Instagram. Tell me what 3 things you're going to do, or comment on YouTube. And if you want to dive deeper into these gut disruptors and the best swaps and the upgrades that you can choose, I have it all laid out in my gut health course. You can find it on SharonMSelby.com, and it's a 10-hour course. But if you're not ready for that, tune in to next week as well, because I'm also going to share my 3 steps to epic gut health. Because now we're aware of what's causing inflammation, I'm going to teach you next week how to drive that down with the food that you eat and go into way more detail. So micro steps have a huge accumulation, and I want you to get started today. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I cannot wait to see you next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me on Heal Your Gut, Heal Your Life. If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. I'd love to hear your feedback. If you're ready to start healing your gut, grab my free gut health guide and recipe book at SharonMSelby.com. See you next week.